Public forum, is there anyone here tonight who wants to say something to the council that is not on the agenda?
I would. I've got two issues. Karen Burton. I'd like to give each of you a copy of the FEMA floodplain map for Kalona. You've probably seen it before.
This is produced by FEMA?
Yep, and I excerpted it. It's one of a very, very large page, which is a PDF file.
Another copy?
Oh, yeah. That is on the site of the Washington County engineer. And I took it and just took the section that deals with Kalona out. So I'd like to make my third-year request that you seriously consider participating in the National Flood Insurance Program. Without Kalona's participation, no renter, homeowner, business owner can buy reasonably priced flood insurance. So I'd just like to do this for the third year. I encourage you to do that. We're vulnerable. Yeah. The second issue is related, and it arose from last week's flash flooding. I went back to the March 1st presentation that MMS gave, and I was struck by two quotes when the Mr. Meisner, Glenn Meisner, was describing phase 1, which is the storm sewers, and sit down. Here are two quotes from him. Quote, "So probably the biggest concern was how we get rid of the storm water and where do we take it. And then we finally came up with the route, which is going to be in our phase 1, is to take it southwesterly and dump it into the creek. We call it West Creek or West Ditch." That was at the beginning of the presentation. Later on in the presentation for phase 1, as he was referring to the stormwater piping plan for installation under the city center parking lot, he pointed to the graphic that he had, which is describing the phases. This graphic, you remember. And he said, "One thing that caught my attention being some storm piping down through here," and he pointed to the City Hall parking lot area. "And this all hooks into a system which all then works its way down and into the West Ditch." When we had the flooding last week, I know it was an extraordinary event. I mean, I was standing over my sump pump praying, and I'd never seen it like that. I've lived here 11 years, and I'm sure people who've lived here much longer than me had never seen it like that before. It was an extraordinary event, but it still makes you wonder or question just how MMS determined that the West Ditch could handle the increased load, the increased volume of new downtown stormwater that wasn't in the past being routed to the West Ditch. It may have eventually wandered there, but how they determined that the capacity was great enough. And I think I would like to see the city ask for specifics on their analysis, because I think they're responsible. That was a route that they apparently chose. It was written into the specifications. And if it is not a good route, the city can be under substantial liability for damages if it's found to be not a properly engineered route. So I would really like to encourage the city to ask MMS for their specifics. They may very well have very good specifics. They probably do. I think everyone assumed they did. But if the phase 1 was hooked up to the West Ditch and that increased volume was going in there last week, that's one thing. But if the phase 1 wasn't hooked up yet, one has to question whether increased volume could be handled by that creek. So apparently it was hooked up, right, Ryan? That was the new,
Out here, no, but the drainage pipes that were in place, as they dig back, they're connecting those.
yeah. Well, if any increase,
We haven't added any flow to that stream.
well, that's the question. That's the question. Clearly, once phase one gets completed, there will be additional flow to that stream. It's coming, as Mr. Meisner said, they're routing everything southwesterly. Now, when you do something like that, that puts you in a position where you can be liable to downstream damage because you are altering the natural flow of things. And so anyway, I'm just saying that I think the city should double check that MMS's analysis is good and that the city won't be on the hook for any further damage. That creek is handling a lot of stuff, and if the city develops the way the development plan has it, additional pressure we put on that creek as additional properties get built up above J Avenue, it's already put additional pressure on that creek up in that area. The F Place people are feeling it. Maybe additional retention basins will be created and stuff, but in any case, I think someone's got to be right on top of the engineering specifications for stormwater, for handling stormwater. Somebody I spoke to today also raised an issue that I certainly hadn't thought of, and that's when the English River is so high, that creek isn't going to be dumping much water. And that was probably the situation that caused that flash flooding last week too, because the river, I think, was like well above flood stage when that 2.5 inches in a very short period of time fell. So that creek wasn't exiting very easily into the English River. Plus, I went down there and looked today. I think there could be a lot of clearing of that creek downstream from where the city's sewer would dump into it. That might have also been a bit of an obstruction too, but it's just the engineering analysis that went into routing the stormwater to that creek, I think, should be double checked by the city. Just
We'll check and see what what extra gallonage or flow they're creating. You know, we're out in the parking lot, and 5th Street, I think is what they're adding to that flow.
And I spoke to Kelly. Karen stopped in the office today, and we talked about it. And I did talk to Kelly Beckler, the engineer of record on the project, and he's very comfortable providing the information for us for review and explaining it to the council, to the public, so that they understand exactly why the diameter pipe is what it is and how that extra capacity and the staging.
what flow they assumed would be additional and how they judge the capacity of the stream. That's
and
good.
How they feel the creek can handle that substantial water.
Do you consider diverting into the other place? Because you go back in history, I was here in '93, and there was a terrible flooding down here in 1993. There was houses that got shut off of their foundations. There were basements that got flooded. And it was all because of the creek. I mean, you look out there when that creek was overflowing, some of these houses looked like they were a battleship fighting the water. So, I mean, I would think you want to divert it somewhere else so you don't have all of it going to the same place.
I don't recall any flooding except the time that there was a long jam underneath the bridge on D Avenue.
Matter of fact, the house across the street from you on the corner, they had to redo that whole foundation because of the flooding. We have a house on D Avenue also. The basement got completely flooded out.
But from the West Creek.
That's where the water was coming from.
And that was before the development up there by Pleasant too.